So this is a little follow-up to our last chat about yoga, right? In my journey of yoga, practicing and teaching, there are a few things that happen that shift my entire practice and my teaching and brought me into a depth of understanding what this practice really is. So we've already spoken in our last video about yoga and breath extension, right? We spoke about the breath having to be a vehicle between the body and the mind merging, right? So the breath and the movement have to begin and end at the same time. Then we spoke about Hatha Yoga is pranayama. So your practice of yoga being the extension of breath, right? Krishnamacharya actually goes on to say that yoga being practiced and taught without breath extension is actually a disservice to the practitioner. So we have that the breath is the vehicle upon which the body and mind merge. They have to move at the same time. Mind is engaged to be present to unite the breath and the body. We talked about the extension of breath. So let me divert a little bit more into a little bit of a story, right? When I first started to understand how breath worked, and I started to incorporate breath extension into my practice, there was a profound shift. A shift I can never go back to. Fast, disconnected, aerobic style practice, I can never go back to, nor will I ever go back to teaching it. But furthermore, humor me here a second. I grew up in a Catholic home. And so I've always been close to God or spirit in some form. And my views of that have changed drastically from a very young age, continuously over my life. But when I started to connect the power of breath in the practice of yoga, I understood that my breath was the foundation of my practice. Took my practice to an entire different level. Now, when I started teaching yoga and really committing to my practice in a huge way, of course, you have communities around you that share certain beliefs, and growing up in a Catholic home, those communities around were generally of certain Catholic beliefs, or what they thought were Catholic beliefs. And generally, there was a little resistance or chatter there is, that would imply that yoga is in contradiction to the teachings of a church or spirituality, or more importantly, contradictory to the teachings of Christ, which is complete nonsense, and that's a different video. But imagine that when I got into the depth of my practice, there was this murmur all around me that I completely ignored, that the practice of yoga was not a sacred practice. It was not of God. It was not in alignment with the teachings of Christ. And I knew it was nonsense, completely. But when I started to get into the depth of my practice and connect to my breath and the extension of breath and the vast presence that my breath held in my practice, that intimacy of breath, that became the most powerful thing in my practice until today. Still today, and probably the day I leave this body, it still will be. But something also happened. Something brought me to Google the word spirit. The most powerful thing in my understanding of spirituality, this great spirit, beyond religion, beyond any boundaries. What does spirit mean? This holy divine spirit. So something brought me to Google the word spirit. And that's when two worlds came together in such a way that it changed my practice and my life, or accelerated its growth in some way. And I found out and discovered that the word spirit came from the Latin word spiritus, and it meant to breathe. Imagine that. Spirit, spirituality, meaning to breathe. So now two worlds combined, right? You had the most powerful thing in my practice, being my breath, in our practice. And then you have my understanding of God and spirit, also meaning to breathe. So could it be possible that every time I stepped on my mat and I started to connect to breath, that I was actually in relationship to spirit? So from that moment, I began to feel and understand that the practice of yoga was in essence a prayer. That our lives are actually prayer. We're constantly in relationship to spirit. But we have to now take a look. Are we aware of our relationship to spirit? Is that an intimate relationship? Or are we, again, sitting on a couch eating potato chips? So, understand and entertain. Let these seeds be planted. That every breath you take is an intimate relationship with spirit. That is your in relationship with a divine being. So when you step to your mat and you begin to breathe and move, ask yourself, right now, if I were making love to spirit, if this relationship with spirit, and I'm not talking about physical love making, I'm talking about real love making, real intimacy. If this practice of yoga represented my intimacy and my relationship to spirit, what would it look like? Would it be fast and disconnected? Would it be... That kind of sounds like you're heading for divorce, right? Or would it be really intimate? Would it be more like... So I invite you to connect to spirit, connect to breath. And next time you step onto your mat, before you start to move, call on spirit. Say a prayer. You know, Iyengar said, my body is my temple, my asanas are my prayers. Connect to that. Your asana is not just your posture. Your asana is everything within that posture. Right? Everything that surrounds that posture is your practice. And that's what we are going to take the third video on this series around yoga. But for now, try to connect to that power of your breath. It's the most powerful thing in your practice. Not just your breath, because we breathe 20,000 times a day, but what is your relationship to your breath? And connect to your relationship to spirit, God, divinity. And see if you could try to grasp and feel that those are actually the very same thing. Enjoy your practice. Love.